All right. Hey there, readers and storytellers. Thank you for joining us for the very first episode of Story Unfolding. This is a new channel for me where I'm trying to help authors, creators, entrepreneurs make a difference in the world around you. So everything we do has an impact on everyone and everything. And we want to raise awareness to that and be more cognizant of how the stuff we put out to the world makes a difference to those around us. Every one of us can make a difference, one person at a time, one small act at a time, and that's what we're trying to do. I am pleased to bring you Adam G. Fleming, who is my very first guest. He is a leadership coach from Goshen, Indiana. He has 12 years of experience training other people in coaching skills. He's had some awesome experience living in the Congo, Egypt, Syria. So for those of you who don't know me or who do know me, I have a travel business. So that obviously made an instant connection to us. I can't wait to keep talking to him beyond this about his travels. He's a novelist, has a fiction novel series he's going to be talking about. He's an author of several nonfiction books. He has a wife and 4 children, so he's done it all, and I can't wait to hear from him. So let's get this going. Adam, thanks for joining me, and yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks, Michael. It's an honor to be your very first guest on your show, Story Unfolding. So, you want me to tell you about myself? I mean, you just did a great intro, man.
Is there anything that I missed?
No, I mean, I think you nailed down the basics. Let's talk about let's talk about books and making a difference. People will get to know me as we go, you know?
All right, let's do it. So your latest project, I'm curious about that. I have it for those of you who can, obviously you are all watching this right now. So you see the Satchel Pong Chronicles behind me. It's a 5-book set. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. So I was working on another book, which still hasn't gotten done. And I thought it'd be really cool to have some rich backstory for this. If there was some kind of quirky hermit writer who lives in a shack somewhere in the backwoods of Indiana, and he writes this steampunk story, and then these other characters pick up on it. They get a copy of it and start to kind of geek out about it. So I started writing. This was back in 2016. I started writing Satchel Pong and the Great Migration, and maybe 18 months later pulled the file out again. And I was like, this is 85% done. And I think it's pretty good. Maybe I should finish this book and not just have it be backstory for another book. And that launched me into a 5-book series, which is now complete, as you mentioned. So Satchel Pong is a meteorologist. In his world, it's a government position. And so he's responsible to give a weather report annually, but he's been neglecting it for 10 years because he knows something that nobody else. He has empirical data for something that everyone else suspects, which is that the world is getting hotter. So he leads his people on a great migration across the world to try to find a place that's safer to be. And throughout the course of the 5-book series, the question comes up that makes it more of a sci-fi series. Can they go off world? Will they need to actually relocate to a different planet for people to survive? And so there's the entire 5-book series. As you can see, it's, I don't know, about 4.5 or 5 inches thick. And right now it's the entire series on e-reader is available this week for 99 cents. So it's a crazy, for all that, it's a crazy deal that I'm running with my publicist. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
That's amazing. Okay. So yeah, that's actually extremely applicable to right now. I was just reading a news story this morning about the heat wave in Islamabad over in Pakistan and India. Have you heard about that?
Actually, I have not. Yeah.
Yeah, they're hitting, what was it? They said they have a string of, they're hitting about 50 degrees Celsius, which is 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And they have a massive drought. So like their electric grid is shutting down, and yeah, they're struggling. So that's very applicable to what we're going through today with, climate change.
Yeah. And I'm not exactly a campaigner, don't get me wrong. It just seemed like an interesting premise to start a story with.
Oh yeah.
But I know that we have people, but I think what I'm more interested in is the leadership qualities that it takes for someone to actually lead people through that kind of global transition. In particular, in our world, we also have island nations in the South Pacific where people are going to have to at some point make a decision. Is it time to just up and leave? And who's going to lead that? And how are they going to help those people relocate to a place where they are welcomed and safe? And so it does explore real world questions about how do you become the kind of leader your people need you to be so that you can help them get to safety in that kind of a situation, whether it's, are people going to leave Islamabad? I mean, that's a massive city. I don't know how many million, but it's big.
Yeah.
And for someone to say it's time for just the entire city to evacuate, that's a massive undertaking that has the potential for a lot of death and destruction if it's done poorly. So
yeah, it's hard to, conceptualize something like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth by saying that you're a campaigner or anything. I'm just saying, every
no,
our words have meaning, and that's
yeah.
Immediately, that's the point of the show, immediately that was where my brain went, because I
No,
just
no,
read this
I'm
news
just
story.
I'm just trying to make sure the readers understand that this isn't like some kind of
oh, definitely
leftist propaganda or something. It's
no, I'm not trying to say that here. So yeah, definitely do not do not read between the lines on those. I'm just suggesting, these comparisons. But yeah, that's really interesting. I'm curious, before we get into more of the deeper questions about the character himself. So Satchel Pong is the main character?
Satchel Pong is the main character of the first book, and he's the main character of the series for sure. But there are later books in the series where other people definitely take more of a prominent role in being the main characters. In a sense, you might say that the world that Satchel Pong lives on is the main character.
Okay. Does he go through significant changes in his personality? Like you say, he's a meteorologist. Like that doesn't really equate to me as in like some big world leader, like I'm gonna lead this great migration. So what transpires, without giving away too much, but what transpires for him to go from, hey, I'm telling the weather, to I'm now leading all these people?
Well, I think it's a matter of the idea in his world is that he should give an annual report like a government official would put out a financial report. He's supposed to say, what are some of the trends or whatever. And it's a little different. It's framed a little differently than what we think of as a weather reporter who gets on TV a couple times a day and tells you what's happening tomorrow. But if you neglect that responsibility for 10 years, sooner or later, somebody's going to come knocking on your door and the populace is going to say, hey, I think it's hotter. I don't have proof, but I know you do. And so in the first couple chapters, he starts it's just like popcorn, people start getting on his nerves until he's, kind of bugged out of his complacency enough to actually go seek advice from the dirigibles, because it is steampunk fantasy. There's got to be dirigibles and there has to be radios and stuff like that. So he goes to a place where there's a radio set and he contacts people who live in the sky. They call them the sky dwellers. And, he starts asking them, well, we have this problem. What should we do? And trying to get advice. So from there, then he's encouraged to lead as many people as will follow him. And so then that's the other whole problem is like, now that you're telling people that there truly is a problem, which everyone has suspected, can you then jar them out of the complacency to do anything about it, to pack up? The story about the frog, you put a frog in a pot with cold water and you gradually heat it up, the frog will boil. It won't jump out, even if you don't put a lid on it. And that's exactly how these people are and how people are in general. You tell them you can live on the side of a volcano. There are people in Mexico who live on the side of a volcano and have for decades, but when's that thing gonna blow? Nobody really knows, but it's good farming, so they just stay. And
yeah,
so
it's in the moment, I guess.
It's people don't. Complacency is a huge issue for leadership. I mean, that's one of the leaders' probably biggest problems is how do you get people out of their complacency so they'll take action?
I feel like that's something you encounter a lot in your profession, right?
Well, as a leadership coach, I'm always coaching leaders on how they can get away from their own complacency and take action, because it always starts with yourself, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so definitely I have seen it, and I think, and it's not like a leadership allegory book either. I mean, sometimes those, allegories are, like I said, it's not a campaign for global warming, it's not a leadership book, but those are the things that I deal with in my profession all the time. So of course they're going to come out in my work.
Yeah, that kind of drives us into the next topic, talking about kind of your process and how your lived experience has really inspired you to, write this story. So I'm curious more about that.
Well, I do love to travel, as you said at the top of the show, Michael, and I've just have been to Congo. Like you said, I lived in Egypt for a while just a few years ago, and came back from that at the end of COVID. So I'm always really interested in cross-cultural situations of any kind and love to invent them uh, in my books, in my fiction. So what I really enjoyed was getting Satchel Pong on a ship with some of his people from his culture, getting them across the ocean, and then, okay, now I'm going to invent and create, some other cultures, and what conflicts are going to come up as a result of running into people who don't share the same value systems, or as one of my good friends from Egypt says, a culture is basically a set of common senses. So when your common sense runs up against someone who has a different set of common sense, and you're both looking at the world going, that doesn't make sense, but actually to the other person it makes perfect sense, because it's an entire set of common senses. That's what a culture is. So I love to, because I've traveled, because I went to central Congo from the cornfields of Illinois when I was 13 years old. This has been a big part of my life since, well, that's 35 years now, and so that's part of what comes out in my writing also, is just like getting people to travel, because that generally means encountering people who are different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love that. I mean, so I run a travel business where we try and bridge cultures through travel, education, and service. And
Yeah.
that's, at the nexus of everything that we do. We homeschool our daughter. We're about to go embark on a trip to Oaxaca, Mexico for 32 days, I believe.
Awesome.
We're leaving at the end of the month. And and then I think we're still debating whether it's going to be next summer or 2023 winter. So either a year or a year and a half where we're going to start our full nomadic journey, and we're going to be complete world schoolers living visa to visa, immersing in those cultures. And I think that is the best way to really, get the pulse of the world and humanity, and to really learn, there's so many lessons to be had by just understanding different cultures, not even understanding, just immersing yourself and being aware of it. We're never really going to be able to understand everyone because we didn't have that lived experience,
Right.
But I think just immersing yourself in it and being aware and being, privy to it makes a big difference. And it's definitely obviously coming out in, the way you write and, some of your choices in your profession. I am curious, I do know that you told me you visited 21 nations, right? And then you lived in the Congo, Egypt, Ivory Coast, and France. So was that all with your family, or was that just you individually?
So let's see. My family went to France for several months when I was 13 to learn French, and then we ended up in Congo, what was then known as Zaire, for 11 months. So that was a little bit over a year experience when I was a kid, middle school age. And then I spent a semester in Ivory Coast when I was in university. So I was with actually a university group. I think there were 9 other students plus the sponsor was a sociology professor. So it was called a study service term. And so we spent the first 6 or 7 weeks in Abidjan studying the culture of Ivory Coast. And then the second 6 weeks of the semester, we went to a different location and did some kind of service. So I helped out in a woodworking shop and did a lot of sanding and
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
repetitive motions, but I was just there working alongside other professional word workers and apprentices, and doing whatever they asked me to do as if I was an apprentice. And it was a good experience for me. So yeah. And then we didn't really, I traveled a lot. I went to Thailand 4 times. I went to Senegal. I went to Belize, and so on. But in 2019, we took our entire family, our 4 kids, to live in Egypt. And the goal was a year. We ended up there for 8 months because COVID hit, and my mother did something fairly unusual. She gave us her advice. He's usually pretty good at like not, telling us how to live our lives as, her adult child. But in this case, she was like pretty scared, and she called us in Egypt and said, I really think you need to come home. And we're like, Mom, it's going to blow over. It's like, and she called back about a week later and said, and repeated her request, which was really unusual. And at that point, we had been in our super tiny flat with all 4 of our kids for a couple of weeks solid, as everyone's been through that, but not in a house that was like a third of the size you're used to.
Yeah.
So we were in this like really tight space. And the second time she called, we were like, yeah, okay, it looks like this thing is going to stick around for a while. And we packed up, and 6 days later we were on a plane back to the States.
Wow.
U.S. Embassy evacuation flight. It's kind of like, if you see those pictures of Vietnam where they're like crawling up onto the roof to get in the helicopter, it was not like that. I like to think it was like that, but it wasn't. And I'm glad it wasn't that much of an ordeal.
Would there be any parallels to this Great Migration?
Well,
like, is it a panicked move, or is it a more of a controlled, kind of like what you experienced?
No, it's more controlled, but Egypt is damn hot. So that relates. I never thought about it that way. That's a great question. No, it's it's calculated. They take their time. They try to do some recruiting, to spread the word. It's an island nation. There's like 9 islands, so they have to send some assistants around and like tell everybody on the different islands, you should come, and then some people ignore them and some people join them. So it's a little bit more of a process, but parallels. I mean, I think the parallel is I'm always planning the next trip and figuring out where I want to go next. So
yeah, it actually sounds quite similar. So I was in the military before I started writing. And so I have a lot of connections with people that are still stationed in Germany and different places, right? And I was hearing about how, the kind of trickle in of, hey, people need to start coming back to the United States with COVID, when it first kicked off in 2019 and stuff. So like there was, obviously with the military, you have, other parameters that, you can't just take off. But there were like people, civilians traveling and stuff like that. And there was a lot of, public rhetoric and, announcements coming out that like, hey, Americans need to start coming back. People need to start moving. I feel like that to me, that kind of, is a little similar to what you're mentioning, like sending those people out to islands saying, hey, you need to start moving, and trying to get people to move. And it's like, obviously, even from your mom, it took you a couple calls to,
that's true,
to make that choice, right? And
then
you have all these people who are like, you have these random strangers coming up and saying, hey, you need to leave. Like, how do you do that? So it's hard.
People are really tied to family. I think if I had been Egyptian, for example, with an opportunity to move to the States, well, that's a little different, because oftentimes the Egyptians I know who do have an opportunity to move to the States or Canada, now it's not always a no-brainer, because it means they're leaving their family. Even if they have the visa and a work visa or something, can come to study, which is kind of like the Holy Grail, like a pretty big dream for a lot of Egyptians. But when the opportunity truly comes up, they think this means I'm going to be disconnected from my family for possibly the rest of my life. And that's really hard. So I think whenever you have that kind of circumstances, it was pretty easy decision ultimately for us to choose to come home, because it meant that we would be within driving distance, at least, of our relatives, even though some of them we didn't see for another year and a half. After, leaving in July of 2019, we didn't see many of them until the summer of 2021. But like most people didn't, if they had relatives across the country. If they were next door, of course we had that. But I think that's the question when you're trying to get people to move, to migrate, to immigrate, is they almost either have to all do it, or it's going to be really like pulling teeth to get the early adapters to even take up the call, I guess.
Yeah, makes sense. That leads me right into another question that I had. You brought up something in the written portion of this interview in response to a question that I asked about basically awareness being the greatest agent for change. And you brought up something about change fitness. And I'm curious what that is. So I feel like this is kind of applicable to what we're talking about.
It absolutely is. I took some continuing education with a guy in Australia several years ago, before 2019, whose name is Dr. Steve Barlow. And he invented change fitness. Well, change fitness existed. He defined it. And essentially the idea is that just like fitness for a marathon is not the same as readiness, there's tons of people in corporate America working in change readiness, but not change fitness. And so the easiest way to say what the difference is let's say you are going to run a marathon. And so somebody has come along and told you, made sure that you understand it's 26.2 miles. They know, where the starting line is, when the race is supposed to start, and what you're supposed to wear, a t-shirt, shorts, and some running shoes. And you're standing there saying, all right, I'm ready. And you're smoking your last 5 cigarettes because you need to get, finish the pack, and you weigh 600 pounds. You say, I'm ready, right? Because you are. You know how long it is, but are you fit enough to actually complete the change process, which is starting line to finish line? And, if you're not fit enough, you can be as ready as you want to be, and you're not going to complete the course. So there's a difference between having change readiness, knowing what it entails and so forth, and change fitness, which means the psychological adaptability, flexibility, ability to sustain the stress under the stress of that change puts on us. So it's a very different kind of idea. That
is readiness a little bit more like instantaneous versus prolonged, or?
Well, people, okay, so like corporate change efforts, for example, have been studied since the 1940s, and something like 75% of them fail. These big change readiness efforts just fail. And they still fail at the same rate now as they did in the 1940s. So all the studies and all the efforts that have been done haven't really haven't moved the ball, because readiness is only a piece of what people really need for. It's really psychological fitness is what it is. It's a fitness within your mentality or your psychology that allows you to accept the changes that are happening to you and work with them as best as you can, and then also to be proactive about the change. So that's what change fitness is. And I had some training in how to do change fitness coaching and help people become more fit for change psychologically.
Now, I envision in a great migration, you run into that wall quite a bit when you're trying to get these people to, to change, right? How do you instill that change fitness that's necessary to move?
Well, I think the reality is that 75% to 95% of the people won't. They just won't. And they're distracted by any number of things. Either they're a little too comfortable yet. You almost have to be super uncomfortable to change. Like if I get too hot, I'll take this hoodie off, but if I get a little bit warm and we're in the middle of this interview, I'm going to like tolerate it. I'd have to get pretty hot to actually have that change process initiated. So I think it's sort of like the frog in the pot again. If you get dropped into a boiling pot of water, you jump out. But if the uncomfortability changes so gradually that you don't notice it, you just get used to a higher and higher level of stress in your life, but you don't actually do anything different.
Yeah, that makes me think about we're talking about this migration, and that makes me think about the situation in Ukraine. I mean, it's a horrible situation with everyone having to leave their belongings, their home, their well-being. They're just
and their families.
Their families. I mean, those roots are deep. And that it's very hard. It's kind of one of those situations that you're talking about that they're forced to move. And it's heartbreaking.
I've always been fascinated by the dynamic of people who, especially the Jewish people who left Germany, for example, before World War II broke out or before the camps started happening. What was the difference in mentality between the people who saw what was happening and said, I'm getting out in 1936, for example, as opposed to the people who stayed until it was too late? And family may be some of it, but I think there's a change fitness element to it, to say some people look at the way things are headed and they say, it's not that bad. And besides, it'll get better probably next week, and then there's other people who look at like, it's getting bad. And they have a little bit different sense of the reality of the situation. It's getting bad. And it's probably only going to get worse for about 10 years or for who knows how long. So it's the ability to see the writing on the wall, but then also to take action on that. Those two things together, that's really hard for humans. It's really hard.
It is. Yeah, well, we are running out of time. So I had a couple more things I wanted to bring up, but I think we covered quite a bit. I do want to give you the opportunity real quick to let the readers know and our audience where they can find you, how to pick up Satchel Pawn Chronicles, what's new in the chute for you, what's coming up. And if there's anything that you can inspire people to do to make a difference, like what would it be, the number one thing? So floor is yours.
Let's start with one thing to do that to inspire you. Be courageous about change in your own life. I went on a long hike in Europe in November. That's 5 months ago. And at the end of it, I said, I've already got 12 books out, but it's time to get serious about marketing them, because 5 to 7 years from now, I want that to be a large part of my income. And things changed really fast when I got home, because I made a commitment to that. And it was hard because I really liked what I was doing before, and I was taking the decision to leave it before I actually hated it, which people usually don't do. Usually they wait until they hate something to make the change. But I took the initiative to say, this other thing is good and I still like doing it. I still have some joy. And I'm talking about where I was training people in coaching skills, but I'm going to leave that before I start to hate it. And then, so have the courage to leave things before you start to hate them and to follow your dreams. It takes a lot of courage,
that's
but
amazing.
It can be done. My books can be found at adamgfleming.com and also on Amazon. And so if you just type Adam G. Fleming into Amazon or the Satchel Pawn Chronicles, you should be able to find this 5-book series, which is the 5-book series is only on e-reader. If you want the paperbacks, those are individual, obviously. What was the last question?
I think that, what's new in the
what's
chute?
next?
Is there anything coming up?
I have a book that's really close to being done called Old Roads, New Friends, which is about my hiking journey in Portugal and Spain in November. So it's more of a nonfiction, kind of an essay on friendship. It's about I don't know, 150 pages. So I've already got the audio book done, and I'm just waiting on cover design, and then going to try to figure out how to launch it, which is a whole nother monster. That might be a Kickstarter. And Jeff Stetson, book number 4, my co-writer and I are going to try to release that on Kindle Vella, which I've never done before. So if you're an e-reader fan and you've tried out Kindle Vella, it might be mid-May till we have the first story up, but you want to look for Stetson Jeff on Kindle Vella and see if you can pick up some of those fun stories. It's a action adventure comedy with a Texan who travels all over the place looking for a good piece of steak and justice, of course.
Wow, that sounds interesting.
It's super fun. It's very funny.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And for all of you out there watching, you can find the full transcript of the interview, the written portion, on my website, michaelcamarillo.com/blog. And you'll see some great things about Adam G. Fleming's great experience in life and some of his feelings on, some big questions that I put out to him in the written portion that we didn't have time to get to today. And I'm hoping to have him come join me over on my other YouTube channel at Novel Excursion Travel to talk more about this travel and cultural experiences that he has had. So Adam, thank you so much for coming, and it's been truly a pleasure.
It's my pleasure, Michael Camarillo. Thank you so much.
All right, read more, write mindfully.